Vernon Sawyer is the Alachua County Animal Services Director. He began working in the field of animal services in the late 1980s in Key West, Florida, as an animal control officer. After that, he worked in law enforcement for 17 years, returning to the animal services field in 2005 when he accepted the position of Field Services Supervisor for Alachua County. In 2011, he was promoted to his current position of Animal Services Director. Welcome, Vernon.
Thank you.
So, you know, my staff and I love doing animal services communications and public relations because you're the warm, fuzzy part of the, or warm, furry part of the county, and you do such great work, you and your staff.
Thank you.
You know, Vernon, I hear you talking about the new direction that animal services is going in general. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Well, years ago, when you talked about animal services or heard about animal services, you seen the old guy with the big hat on and a big net and, you know, chasing after a dog down the street. The shelter was considered a pound. You know, the shelters were always out near a dump or at the very edge of town. So in the last 4 years, we've been working really hard on trying to change our image because we're so much more. Right. We are enforcement. We do enforce the county ordinances. We do investigate cruelty complaints. So it's a very important part of our job. But we also rescue animals. You know, we get calls on sick or injured animals. Our officers respond. And we try to do whatever we can to save those animals' lives. Right. So I have tried to change the shelter more from an enforcement to more of a community resource.
Now, what can be one of the most stressful and difficult times for a person is the loss of a pet. And I don't mean the death of a pet, I mean their pet gets loose or they can't find it. I know you guys do great work when it comes to putting people and their pets back together, and I know that there's so many ways you do that. One of the things that I thought was kind of interesting was that you recently, I believe it was a grant that you got that helped you kind of update the technology in your vehicles with laptops. Tell us about that.
It was a grant through Wagmore, so there was no real cost to the citizens of Alachua County.
And for those who don't know, what is Wagmore?
Wagmore is a group that basically helps all the other rescue groups and animal services in Alachua County. We're able to apply for grants through them to enhance our services and to save more animals' lives.
And tell me about those computers that you've added.
So in all of our vehicles, we have laptops and scanners now, and that enables us that when we find an animal running at large, we're able to scan that animal for a microchip and enter that information into our computers and hopefully find the owner and call the owner or where the animal lives and return the animal back to the owner.
Now, how does the animal get that chip to begin with?
It's a microchip. It can be done at any of the local vets. We also do it at Animal Services. It takes about 5 minutes. You know, it's something that is so simple that I would recommend everybody to do it.
And what kind of information does that tell you? Just the owner, the address?
Right. It gives the basic owner information, the address, the phone number, the pet's name. Also, it tells you normally what veterinarian put it in. So if we're not able to get a hold of the owner for whatever reason, we can sometimes reach out to the veterinarian that placed the chip into the animal.
And I know ID tags are still important and licensing is still important.
It is an Alachua County ordinance that your animal must be licensed if you live within Alachua County. But one of the most important things about those licenses is that it gives us the ability, if somebody finds your animal running at large, to call us and say, we have a dog here or a cat here, it's got a county license number, and we are able then to look that information up into our database and contact the owner and say, hey, your dog's at, you know, this location, please go pick it up.
And local vets can do the licensing?
Yes, local vets can also do the licenses.
So everyone kind of does everything. You can do it out at your shop or a local vet. I know you have an online assistance for finding pets too. Tell me about that.
Pet Finder, it's all the animals that the officers pick up or all the animals that are brought into the shelter are photographed and put onto Pet Finder. So if you're missing your animal, it's a good way for you to just go online and look. However, that is not an absolute. I do recommend that if you are missing an animal to physically come down to Animal Services and walk the kennels to look for your animal.
Well, particularly if you have an animal that hasn't been chipped or licensed, or you have no way to really put them together with their owners unless you have that information.
That's correct. And unfortunately, most of the animals that we euthanize is a result of not being able to find the owner or the owner not coming to reclaim the animal.
Now, what are, I know that also you get a lot of pets at the shelter. Where do pets that come in that are not reclaimed, not just a lost pet that you reunite with its owner, but where do all the animals come from that are in the shelter?
You know, it's a mix of people who have, for whatever reason, decided that they are unable to care for that animal, and they bring them to us, to animals that we find running at large, to animals that we seize from bad situations, and that we treat and get them healthy again, and then available to adopt.
So people are allowed to surrender an animal to you?
Yes. However, I would recommend for people to look at other options. We should be the absolute last resort. We do our best to get all the animals adopted. However, that is not a guarantee. There is a chance that your animal may be euthanized. And there's so many different ways of rehoming your pet these days. You can look at Craigslist. You can, social media. There's, different rescue groups here in this county. Again, Animal Services should be the last resort.
You mentioned other rescue groups, and I know you work with all of the rescue groups. Who are some of those groups, and tell me how you work with them?
There's several different groups, as you said. There's Humane Society of Alachua County. There's Gainesville Pet Rescue. There's No More Homeless Pets. There's Helping Hands. Probably forgetting a ton of them.
We'll put them up graphically if there's any you forgot.
But so we work together with them. They will occasionally take animals from us, and if we are incredibly full, we will put out a plea to the rescue groups to come and get animals from us.
Now, Vern, I know that you do great stuff, and you get, I'm always amazed at the variety of partnerships you have, not only with local organizations, but with national organizations like Maddie's and Rachel Ray. But tell us about the Rachel Ray Challenge that you recently competed in.
So this was a challenge through the United States from the ASPCA and Rachel Ray, and it was called...
And who is Rachel Ray, for those who may not know?
She's an awesome cook.
That's right.
But
she's got a syndicated
a TV show, and
she cares about animals.
And obviously she cares about animals, and she does a lot for them. And this challenge was basically to adopt out as many animals that you could, and to look at animals that shelters would not ordinarily adopt out, such as animals with minor skin conditions or heartworms or other minor ailments that would necessarily stop that animal from being able to go out to citizens, opposed to rescue groups.
So the ones that are not the most perfect adoptable.
Correct.
Right.
And with some minor behavior issues, not talking aggressive, but just, running away, not coming to you when they get away from you and stuff like that.
What was the outcome? I mean, how many pets were saved as a result of this challenge?
We saved 1,488 animals. 169 animals were returned to owners, and we adopted out 805 animals.
And how did you do in the competition or in the challenge? Where did you rank?
We came in second within our division and 15th nationwide.
Second with like-sized
Yeah, the
counties?
same, the same intake, the same amount of animals.
Right.
For instance, we're compared against other organizations that bring in approximately 5,000 to 6,000 animals a year.
I see. And this was over and above what your history showed you would have done anyway? There was a baseline, and then you had to go over that?
There was a baseline that was established, and I'll tell you something that I'm very proud of. My staff is we have actually increased our adoptions every year. We have went up significantly. In 2012, we were doing anywhere from about 700 to 800 adoptions, and now we're well over 1,000 adoptions a year.
Wow. Now, I know we've also, Animal Services has been very involved with Maddie's. Is it Maddie's Fund or Maddie's
Yes,
group?
Maddie's Fund.
And I don't know if we're still involved with that or if that has come to an end, but can you tell us something about the history of that and the effectiveness of that?
So it's come to an end, basically. They are still participating with grants, but this was a grant that was provided to shelters all throughout the United States to save animals. And it was actually a stipend available for rescue groups who pull animals from the shelters to receive money for those particular animals.
I see.
So it was a great incentive for the groups to pull animals and then also start working on building up their rescue groups so that in time they could pull more animals from the shelters.
And we were involved in that for several years.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, 5 years, I believe.
And who was Maddie?
Maddie's was created by David and Cheryl Duffield, who was also the creator of PeopleSoft, a very famous software company.
Right.
And they had a dog named Maddie. It was a Schnauzer. It died in 1997. And in the honor of Maddie, they created this fund to help shelters around the United States to save more lives.
Those people loved their dog.
Absolutely.
And do you have any idea? Now, was part of Maddie's kind of objective the whole idea of no-kill shelters?
Sure.
And there's some confusion over exactly what that means, but I know that's something we aspire to, correct?
Absolutely.
So what does it mean to be a no-kill shelter?
Well, there's 100 different views on this. As far as Alachua County Animal Services is concerned, no-kill is us reaching a 90% live release rate to where we are obviously releasing, or adopting out or returning back to owners 90% of the animals that we take in each year. Unfortunately, there will always be animals, whether they're sick or injured or because of their behavior, that we will not be able to adopt, and those animals will have to be humanely euthanized.
And those aren't included in the no-kill kind of percentage, or they are?
Well, the animals that cannot be saved per se because of behavior and all that, for me to say that they would not absolutely be considered, it's probably not fair, because you always have to look at that.
I understand.
And it's just something that there's no way around it.
And I know along those lines, the variety of events and the creativity that you all bring to themes and different partnerships has been really remarkable. I was telling you before that we started rolling that I was out driving with my daughter this weekend, and we happened to go by Animal Services, and it was packed.
Yes, we had an awesome turnout.
What was this event?
Summer Lovin'.
Summer Lovin'. The Summer of Love.
Summer of Love, absolutely. So we had, music playing. We had records hanging from the ceiling. Some of the staff had some costume on. We try to go all out to draw as many people as we can, to come and look at the animals. And, I have to give all the credit to my staff, Jane, Grantman, and of course the adoption staff and everybody else, because it takes the whole team,
Right.
To really put those things together.
I know you also have an amazing network of volunteers.
Yeah.
And is that something you're always looking for?
Yes, we are always looking for volunteers. And I'll give you an example. This last event, the Summer Lovin' event, we had volunteers, but we also had the student chapter of Association of Shelter Vets
Oh, okay.
that really organized this with us, and not only that, they participated in the event. And their vets from the university spayed and neutered a lot of the animals that were put up for adoption.
We'll be putting the number for people to call graphically so that they can do that. But what type of duties or activities do volunteers perform?
From everything from walking dogs to helping us at the adoption events. You know, just taking a dog or a cat out of the kennel or out of the cage and petting it and socializing it does more for that animal than anything else.
Right.
And so, you know, if you have the time and you want to come and volunteer with us and spend the day cuddling cats or playing with dogs out in the playground, you know, I can't think of a better way to spend the day.
Sounds kind of therapeutic.
Yeah, it is.
How to release the stress from your
Absolutely.
week. Now, I hear a lot about folks that are kind enough to foster animals. Is that something that's organized through your shop?
Absolutely, and we're always looking for fosters. You know, occasionally, well, I say occasionally, it actually happens quite frequently. We get in young cats or young puppies. It's not, the shelter is not a healthy environment for these little ones. They need to be fed every 3 or 4 hours, you know, and cared for. So we allow these animals to go home with the fosters who care for them till they're old enough to be brought back and spayed and neutered and hopefully adopted out.
How many times do fosters end up keeping the pets?
Happens quite a bit. You know, and I'll tell you, I'm a victim of, it's called a failed fostering. So, you know, I'm a victim of it myself, and it happens frequently, but hey, you know, what better way to get your forever friend, you know? You get them from they're a baby, and
And you get to make sure you're compatible.
absolutely, you can teach them all the bad habits. And
That's right. So do you have like a really broad network of fosters that you can call on?
we have a pretty good program going, but we're always looking for volunteers to foster.
Okay, and they can call that same number that we're
Absolutely.
showing. I know that one of the areas that can be difficult that you have to deal with are dangerous animals and dangerous dogs. Can you tell us a little bit about if a citizen encounters something like that, or if they're aware of something, or if someone gets bitten, heaven forbid, what happens? What is the procedure?
So we have 2 different classifications. We have an aggressive dog classification, and that is basically an animal-on-animal attack. And then we have a dangerous dog classification, which is an animal attack on a person. And what will normally happen if your animal it was attacked by another animal, you would contact us. We would send an officer out there. We would investigate it, and if it was determined that the owner of the animal that attacked was responsible for that, then they could be cited.
Like it was off a leash, or
If it was running at large, if it jumped over the fence,
or if they lose control of it because of its
or if they
aggressive-
lose control in certain circumstances, yes.
And you all conduct investigations and, when necessary, turn it over to law enforcement or the judicial?
What we normally do, as far as the other classification, is a dangerous dog, and that is an attack on a person. And the officers will investigate that, and sometimes they will seize that animal. And then you go before a board, and it will determine whether or not that animal is considered a dangerous animal. And then there are some insurance requirements, and also the way that you maintain that animal. It has to be kept in an enclosure, and other standards.
Well, let's go back to the warm and fuzzy part of what you do.
Absolutely.
You know, there's a lot of talk about, particularly when you're in government, about the importance of planning and disaster planning. But it's important to also keep in mind that pet when you're disaster
Absolutely.
planning. So what do you recommend to folks?
Absolutely. I mean, it's hurricane season now. You should have the appropriate amount of food, the appropriate carrier to contain your pet if you're leaving or going to a shelter, medicine for that animal if it has a requirement for such. But more importantly, know what you're going to do.
Right.
You know, are you going to a shelter? Are you going to go out of town? You know, have that down and everybody be on the same page. So you're not waiting to the last second.
Right, right. And you brought up shelters. When a state of emergency exists in Alachua County because of a storm or whatever, Alachua County certainly opens shelters for people, but how does it work? If you just show up at a shelter with your pet, do you?
So
yeah, walk us through that.
we are actually now in the middle of meeting with the school board and other agencies to look at other options. But currently, at this time, you would bring your animal to whatever shelter you would going to be checking into, and we would take that animal to Animal Services, where it would be cared for.
So you don't have to be concerned that you're going to the right shelter for a pet. We'll get the pet there?
That is the current plan, yes.
Interesting. Okay. We're rapidly running out of time, but I did want to bring up something that I read about recently, and that was your cooperation with a UF California Davis program to save 1 million cats.
1 million cats,
Yeah.
yes. Dr. Levy from UF approached us a while back, and this is an awesome program. It's not just with us, it's going on all over the United States where shelters are being challenged to save a total of 1 million cats' lives. And part of that is participating in a feral relocation, or not relocation, but a bringing in a feral cat, neutering it, and returning it back to the community.
And a feral cat is one that's never been a pet, is that correct? Just a wild?
It's
in
a
effect,
wild cat.
Yeah.
And it's important to work with the community to make sure that there's not, you know, that the animal's not creating a nuisance or it's not a health or safety issue. So we look at all that before we release the animal back in.
Tell me a little bit about, I'm always so impressed by your Facebook site. I don't know who administers that, but that is really a great resource for the community. You guys highlight your available pets, and you've always got something interesting about the next upcoming event. So I highly recommend citizens go and like that page. But
absolutely,
who get? I mean, you may have more than one person doing it, but it's really well done.
You know, it's actually done by a couple of the staff at Animal Services and some volunteers as well. You know, learned a long time ago that social media is absolutely the way to go to get your message out. And it's really increased our adoption events and the awareness of what we're about.
Yeah. Vernon, you sent me a video, and, you know, I had a basic feel for how quickly cats and dogs can multiply, but you sent me a video that showed in really alarming fashion how quickly these animals can multiply. Where did you get that, and can you tell us about that?
You know, I actually got it off of YouTube. It's from PETA, and it shows just how two animals, you know, mating can produce a litter, and then how that litter can produce another litter, and so on and so forth, to where you go from 2 animals to 100 animals within months,
right,
or, you know, years. So it's very important to spay and neuter your pets. And one of the ways that we can become a no-kill shelter is by the community helping us by spaying and neutering your pets.
And aren't there a lot of resources to help people with that?
Actually, you know, this community is very fortunate. There's several different resources. There's No more homeless pets that provide a low-cost spay-neuter.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, really there's no excuse to let your animals reproduce, basically.
Right. Well, thank you and your staff for the amazing work that you do, and thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mark.
Dogs can't flush, so wherever they do their business, scoop the poop, bag it, and trash it. Clean creeks, clean yards, clean paws. A message from the Gainesville Clean Water Partnership.
We used to write letters to each other a lot, and it was intimidating to talk to him sometimes because he just seemed so isolated by himself.
She started talking about how she wishes that her life was over and she wishes that she was never born.
So I knew he had depression, but I didn't know it was that far.
Said something to me about killing himself.
Tell somebody, tell an adult, a counselor, parent, whatever.
You have to try and help them get help.
You have to take it seriously. You can't assume that they're just saying it because the risk is too great.
It's a hard situation because you do risk making that person very angry and losing their friendship.
It would have been horrible for me if she never talked to me again, but I'd live with it because I know she'd be alive.
Definitely worth getting help, even if you think you're going to lose a friendship, because it's better to lose the friendship than the actual friend.
Honey! Okay. I'm okay.
It's cleaning time. Be on the lookout for the following items that are hazardous to our environment unless disposed of properly. In the garage, gasoline, car fluids, antifreeze, paint, corrosives, fertilizers, pesticides, pool chemicals, propane tanks, and batteries. Please label the containers and pack them carefully for transport to the Alachua County Environmental Protection Department's Hazardous Waste Collection Center in Gainesville. You don't even need to get out of your car. We make cleaning easy. Call today for more information.